The house on Maple Ridge Drive had belonged to Jennifer Morrison for exactly 9 months when she finished the pool. It wasn't just any pool. It was her pool, the thing she'd imagined since she was 12 years old, watching her neighbors' kids splash and laugh while she sat on a concrete patio in a cramped apartment downtown. 47 years later, after 2 divorces, a promotion to VP of Operations at Hartley and Associates, and a decision to never settle for less than extraordinary, Jennifer had bought the house on the hill overlooking the valley. The pool came next. $85,000, custom limestone surround, a saltwater system that required no chlorine, underwater lighting that turned the water into liquid sapphire at night, a waterfall feature that she'd designed herself, curved like a woman's body, elegant and alive. The contractor, a weathered man named Dale with kind eyes, had warned her it would be a statement piece. "Everyone's gonna want to use it," he'd said, not unkindly, as he surveyed the finished product on a blazing afternoon in late May. Jennifer had laughed, let them want. She'd had the wrought iron gates installed at the property line that same week. For the first month, Jennifer lived in a state of private bliss. She'd wake at 5 a.m., slip into her silk robe, and descend the stone steps to her backyard. The world was still asleep, just the birds and the sound of water lapping against tile. She'd float on her back, staring at the sky, feeling the weight of 47 years of hard choices and harder compromises slowly dissolving into the salt water. It was in early July when she first heard the voices. She was inside her kitchen, all gleaming white cabinetry and stainless steel, making her morning smoothie when she heard them. Children's laughter, the distinctive splash of a cannonball, the squeal of what sounded like teenage girls. Jennifer's coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. She set it down carefully and walked to the window. Her backyard was full of people. Not full, packed. There were at least 20 kids in and around her pool, ranging in age from maybe 6 to 18. There were coolers on her limestone surround. Someone had brought an inflatable raft shaped like a pizza. A boom box, an actual boom box, who even made those anymore, was playing hip-hop from the bushes near the fence line. Her fence line, which she'd paid for, which was supposed to be locked. Jennifer set her jaw and marched outside. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut through the chaos. "Excuse me, this is private property." The music didn't stop. A few heads turned, kids with chlorine-wet hair and confused expressions, like she was the strange element in their perfectly normal summer day. "Hi, Mrs. Morrison," one of the girls called out cheerfully. She was maybe 16, with a nose ring and an easy confidence that suggested she'd never been told no in her life. "Your pool is so amazing. Derek said we could come over." Derek. Jennifer felt something tighten in her chest. Derek lived next door, well, not immediately next door, but 4 houses down the cul-de-sac. She'd met him twice since moving in. He was maybe 30, always friendly, always waving, always too loud in his driveway at night. "Who gave Derek permission to invite you here?" Jennifer asked, each word clipped and precise. The girl's smile faltered slightly. Isn't Derek your—" "No, Derek is not my anything. Derek does not live here. Derek does not own this pool. I do. And I did not invite any of you." She walked to the boom box, turned it off mid-song, and gestured toward the gate. "Everyone out, now, please." There was a moment of collective hesitation, that split second where teenage brains usually caught up with what an adult was actually saying. Then came the scattered protests. "Come on, we're just swimming. My mom said, this is so unfair." But they came out eventually, dripping water across her limestone surround, leaving wet footprints across her deck. As they filed past her toward the gate, Jennifer caught sight of Derek ambling out from behind the pool house, where he'd apparently been helping himself to her privacy. He was holding a beer. "Hey, Jen," he said, with the casual warmth of someone who just assumed they were friends. "The kids wanted to cool off. It's like 95 degrees. "The fact that it's hot is not my problem," Jennifer said quietly. "This pool is not public property. The gate is locked for a reason." Derek's expression shifted, not defensive exactly, but confused, like she'd just violated some social contract he believed existed between neighbors. "Right, but we live pretty close by. Seemed like a friendly thing, a community thing." "I'm not interested in community access to my property," Jennifer said. "I paid for this. I maintain it. I use it for privacy and peace. If you'd like to use a public pool, there's one at the recreation center on 5th Street. Derek stared at her for a long moment, and she could see the wheels turning. He was trying to figure out if she was serious, or if this was some kind of joke that he was supposed to play along with. She was serious. "Okay," he said finally, setting his beer down on her deck on her limestone with deliberate slowness. "We're going." But as he herded the teenagers out and Jennifer locked the gate behind them, she saw the look he gave her. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was disappointment. The kind of disappointment people reserve for those who don't understand how the world was supposed to work. Jennifer understood perfectly well how the world worked. The world worked like this. You earned something, you got to keep it. You paid for it, it was yours. You built something beautiful, you didn't have to share it with anyone who hadn't helped you build it. It was a simple formula, and it had served her well for 47 years. She didn't expect Derek and his friends to understand it, but she hoped the message had been clear. It wasn't. 2 days later, on a Saturday afternoon, Jennifer was working in her home office, reviewing budget proposals for the upcoming fiscal year, when she heard the music again. This time there were more people, and this time someone had brought snacks. She found Derek on her pool deck, grilling hot dogs on a portable grill that definitely was not his property, instructing several teenagers on proper pool noodle combat etiquette. This time, Jennifer didn't go outside. This time, she called the non-emergency police number. It took 45 minutes for Officer Patricia Chen to arrive, and by then Derek and his crew had scattered, leaving Jennifer's deck looking like a beach bar had exploded across it. Empty beer bottles, plastic plates, a flip-flop that didn't belong to her. Officer Chen was professional but clearly unenthusiastic. She took a statement, nodded sympathetically, and explained that since there was no sign posted and no prior police report, prosecution would be difficult. "It's a civil matter at this point," she said, in the tone of someone who had explained this exact thing many times before. "You could get a lawyer involved, but honestly, most neighbors work this out themselves. Maybe just talk to him." Talk to him. Jennifer had talked to him. She'd been very clear. By the following Monday, she'd hired a lawyer and had custom no trespassing signs installed at her gate. Large ones, bright red, professional, the kind that said, "I am not joking, I am not being unfriendly, I am being legal." Derek did not like the signs. She knew this because he appeared at her front door at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, clearly agitated. His easygoing neighbor mask cracked just enough to show something harder underneath. "Those signs are aggressive," he said, not bothering with hello. Jennifer, who'd been reading a report from her legal team, set it aside with the slow deliberation of someone counting to 10 internally. "They're informative." "They're insulting. We're neighbors, Jen. People help each other. People share. That's what being part of a community means." "What being part of a community means," Jennifer said quietly, "is respecting people's property and privacy. You haven't done that. I asked you to stop. You didn't, so now I'm making it official." Derek's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You know what? Fuck this. Fuck you, actually. You move into a neighborhood, you get a fancy pool, and you act like you're better than everyone else. You won't even let kids have a place to cool off in the summer." "There is a public pool," Jennifer said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You know what your problem is?" Derek stepped closer, his voice dropping to something meaner. "You spent so much time getting rich, you forgot how to be human. You think money makes you better. You think buying a fancy house and a fancy pool makes you someone worth being around. But you're just lonely. You're just a lonely, bitter old woman." "Get off my property," Jennifer said. She didn't move. She didn't flinch. She simply stated a fact with the same tone she used in board meetings. "Now." Derek stared at her for another long moment, his face flushed with anger and something else. Something like shame, maybe, or the frustration of someone unused to not getting what he wanted. Then he turned and walked back to his truck, gunning the engine with unnecessary force as he pulled away. Jennifer closed the door, locked it, and returned to her report. She thought that would be the end of it. She was wrong. The invasion started in earnest the second week of July. At first, it was subtle. A gap in the gate, not large enough that she could prove Derek had done it, but large enough for a determined 13-year-old to slip through. She fixed it. It appeared again 2 days later. Then came the night swim. She woke at 1 a.m. to blue light dancing across her bedroom ceiling and the sound of teenage voices doing cannonballs in her pool. When she went outside with her phone to call the police, she found 6 kids already scattered, running toward the fence. They disappeared into the darkness before she could even get a clear look at them. Officer Chen came back. This time she seemed less sympathetic. "You might consider just draining it," she suggested, not unkindly, "if you're this concerned about unauthorized use." Drain it, as if the problem was Jennifer's pool, not Derek and his inability to accept that some people didn't want to be his friend. The incidents escalated in frequency and creativity. Someone threw a raw egg at her pool house. The gate was vandalized with spray paint. Nothing obscene, just the word share repeated in white letters. A group of teenagers left a fake dead fish floating in her water, complete with a note that said community property in dripping red letters. Jennifer documented everything. She took photos. She filed reports. She contacted the police so many times that Officer Chen started to visibly sigh when she saw Jennifer's number come up on her phone. "Have you considered just letting them use it?" Officer Chen asked during her 5th visit in 3 weeks. It wasn't a question. It was a suggestion that Jennifer's refusal to bend was somehow the actual problem. "Have you considered doing your job?" Jennifer replied. Officer Chen's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. By early August, Jennifer realized that the police weren't going to help her. The town's attitude was clear. She was the problem. A woman who had worked 60-hour weeks for 20 years, who had negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts and built something from nothing, who had earned the right to enjoy her own property in peace. She was the problem because she wouldn't share. So Jennifer stopped calling the police. Instead, she made a different kind of plan. It came to her on a Tuesday night, while she sat at her kitchen island, staring out at her pool gleaming in the darkness. She thought about Derek, about his certainty that she owed him and his friends something. She thought about the teenagers who'd been raised in a world where no was just a starting point for negotiation. She thought about the community that valued sharing over consent, generosity over boundaries, friendship over respect. She thought about how to teach them all a lesson without ever calling the police again. Jennifer pulled out her phone and, for the first time in weeks, texted Derek. "Hey, been thinking you were right. Let's set something up. Pool party, Saturday, 7 p.m., my treat." She waited, watching the 3 dots appear and disappear as Derek typed and retyped his response. Finally, it came. "For real, that's awesome, Jen. I'll spread the word." Jennifer smiled. Then she started making calls. The events of Saturday, August 10th, would be discussed in the neighborhood for years afterward. Derek arrived first at 6:45 p.m., carrying beer and the confident air of someone who just won a victory he'd been fighting for all summer. Behind him came a steady stream of cars, teenagers in pickup trucks, younger kids with their parents, people Jennifer had never met but who'd apparently heard through the grapevine that the cold, rich woman with the fancy pool had finally decided to be human. By 7:15 p.m., there were 83 people in her backyard. Jennifer had catered the event professionally. There were tables laden with food, a bartender she'd hired mixing mojitos, a playlist curated specifically for a pool party. She'd hired a lifeguard, an actual certified lifeguard, to supervise. She'd even rented a photo booth and hired a photographer to document the evening. Derek found her on the deck, champagne in hand, and actually hugged her. "I knew you'd come around," he said. "I knew you just needed to remember what it means to be part of something." Jennifer smiled and said nothing. At 8:30 p.m., as the party was in full swing and the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, a woman approached Jennifer. She was professionally dressed, carrying a folder, and she had the particular bearing of someone about to deliver news that would not be welcome. "Ms. Morrison, I'm Rebecca Hartwell from the County Health Department. I'm here regarding the incident report filed by your property management company on August 5th. Derek, who was nearby, stiffened. "Incident report?" Jennifer asked innocently. "Yes, unauthorized use of a private pool, property damage, trespassing, multiple counts over several weeks." Rebecca opened her folder and Jennifer got a glimpse of photos. The vandalized gate, the egg on her pool house, the fake fish, all documented, all filed officially with timestamps and county seal. Additionally, your management company reported what appears to be contamination of your pool facilities on several occasions. Given that this is a saltwater system maintained to specific health codes, and given the evidence of unauthorized and potentially unsanitary use, we've been conducting an investigation." "Contamination," Jennifer said, raising an eyebrow. What kind of contamination? Fecal matter, for one thing. Someone appears to have used your pool as a bathroom on at least 2 occasions in the past month. We have samples. It's been documented. Jennifer watched Derek's face drain of color. We're issuing a formal fine to all parties involved in the unauthorized use of this facility, Rebecca continued, her voice maddeningly professional. As well as citations for property damage and trespassing. We'll be requiring all of you to disperse immediately. All of us, Derek said, but this is a party. She invited us. She's hosting an unauthorized public gathering, Rebecca interrupted, on a property that has been compromised by unsanitary conditions. Everyone needs to leave, now. What happened next was beautiful in its chaos. Parents who'd come to supervise suddenly realized they might be liable. Teenagers scattered like startled birds. Derek stood in the center of the backyard, holding his beer, understanding with horrifying clarity that he'd been set up. That every nice word Jennifer had said, every indication that she'd changed her mind, had been a trap. You planned this, he said, his voice low and furious. You invited us here so you could, what? Humiliate us, get us in trouble. Jennifer didn't respond. She simply stood on her deck, beautiful and composed and utterly unmoved, while the health department official ushered the last of the stragglers toward her gate. Within 30 minutes, her backyard was empty again. Just her, the slowly darkening sky, and the sound of her pool water lapping against the edges. Derek came back to her just before he left, his face flushed with shame and anger in equal measure. That was cruel, he said. That was genuinely cruel, and you're a bad person. Jennifer looked at him for a long moment. Then she said very simply, No, a bad person would have drowned you all in it. Derek left, but he'd understood the real message, that she'd given him a chance to make a reasonable choice, and he'd responded by deciding that he was entitled to ignore her boundaries, that the entire neighborhood had decided the same thing. So she'd shown them all exactly what that kind of thinking would cost. As Jennifer walked back inside her house, she felt the tension that had wound through her body for the past month finally begin to release. The invasion was over. The pool was hers again. But that night, as she lay in bed staring at her ceiling, she found herself thinking about Derek's final words, "You're a bad person." And she wondered, with the kind of dark, quiet questioning that comes at 3 in the morning, whether winning and losing had somehow become the same thing. Jennifer first learned about it when her best friend Patricia called at 7 a.m., her voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Tell me," Patricia said, "that I'm not reading about you on the front page of the Sentinel's neighborhood section." "Tell me you're calling about something else," Jennifer replied, but her stomach had already dropped. She didn't have to search for it. Patricia sent her the link within seconds. The headline was painted in the kind of dramatic language reserved for slow news cycles. Local woman uses health DEPT to humiliate neighborhood TENAGRS. The article didn't pull any punches. It detailed her rejection of her neighbors, her hostile response to what the writer called benign social interaction, and then her calculated entrapment of Derek's group. There were quotes from Derek himself, generous, unflattering to Jennifer, from parents who'd been at the party. "She invited us. We thought it was a peace offering." And from the neighborhood Facebook group, where the opinion seemed to be that Jennifer had overreacted to the point of psychological warfare. "She could have just talked to them," one quote read. "Instead, she humiliated a bunch of kids. That says everything you need to know about her character." What it didn't mention was the 6 weeks of trespassing, the vandalism, the literal human waste in her pool. What it didn't mention was that she'd asked repeatedly, privately, for people to stop. What it didn't mention was the countless nights she'd lain awake, listening to her property being invaded, powerless to stop it. But those details didn't fit the narrative the article had already decided on. The narrative was, rich woman, poor community, pool as symbol of wealth and selfishness, Jennifer as symbol of everything wrong with modern America. By Monday, the Sentinel had received 340 letters to the editor. 78% were hostile to Jennifer. Her office phone began to ring at 8:45 a.m. "Is this Jennifer Morrison?" the first caller asked. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Robert Chen from the Sentinel. I'm working on a follow-up story about the pool incident. I'd like to get your side of." Jennifer hung up. The second call came from a number she recognized. Martin Hartley, the founder and CEO of Hartley and Associates, the company where she'd worked for the past 19 years. The company where she was now VP of operations. The company that had built its entire brand on being a values-driven organization that prioritized ethics and community responsibility. "Jennifer, I need you to come to my office," Martin said. He didn't sound angry, he sounded disappointed, which was somehow worse. She was there by 10 a.m. Martin was a tall man in his 60s, with silver hair and the bearing of someone who'd never had to wonder if he belonged anywhere. He stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city, when Jennifer entered. "Sit down," he said. She sat. "I've been getting calls," he continued, still not turning to face her. "From clients, from vendors, from the community outreach committee we sponsor. They're all asking the same question. Does Hartley and Associates really align with someone who would treat a community the way you treated yours?" "With respect and boundaries?" Jennifer asked coolly. Martin turned to face her then. "With cruelty, with entrapment, with a calculated humiliation of people who were, by all accounts, just trying to be neighborly." "Those people were trespassing." "Were they?" Martin moved to his desk and pulled up something on his computer. He turned the monitor toward her. It was the neighborhood Facebook group, and it was filled with posts from people claiming that Derek had asked permission, that he'd said it was okay with her, that she'd changed her mind, and then deliberately set a trap. "Nobody's going to believe you," Martin said quietly, "because the story's already been told. You're the villain and we're Hartley and Associates, and our entire brand is built on the idea that we're different, that we care about people, that we're good corporate citizens." He paused. "This doesn't look like that." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying that we can't have a VP of operations who's currently the subject of a neighborhood-wide hate campaign. It's bad for business. It's bad for our brand. It's bad for us." Jennifer's hands, which had been folded neatly in her lap, suddenly felt cold. "You're firing me." "I'm suggesting you take a leave of absence, unpaid, until this dies down, and maybe when you come back, if you come back, we revisit your position." It wasn't a firing, technically, which meant she didn't have legal recourse, which meant it was brilliant, actually, in a corporate-approved kind of way. "Martin, I worked for." "I know what you've done here," he said, not unkindly. "And I appreciate it, but there's no room for this right now. Take some time, let things cool down, and Jennifer," he paused, "maybe next time consider that being right isn't the same as being wise." By 2 p.m., Jennifer had cleared out her office. By 3 p.m., she'd filed paperwork indicating that she was on medical leave. By 4 p.m., she was sitting in her kitchen in the house that had cost her $1.2 million, the house that had been supposed to be her sanctuary, and she was beginning to understand that she'd made a serious miscalculation. The next week was worse. Protesters showed up at her gate, teenagers and some sympathetic parents, holding signs that said SHARING is caring and pools aren't for hoarders. They were peaceful, which somehow made it worse. They weren't threatening. They were just present, a constant, judging presence that made her feel like a monster every time she needed to leave or enter her own home. The local elementary school reached out asking if she'd be willing to let them use her pool as part of their summer enrichment program. When she declined, it made the news again. Local pool owner DENIES water safety lessons to underprivileged youth. The underprivileged youth were mostly the same teenagers who'd been vandalizing her property 6 weeks ago. But that detail didn't make the story. The worst part was the calls. They started as early as 6 a.m. and continued late into the night. People she'd never met, screaming at her for being selfish. People telling her that she was everything wrong with the world. One woman spent 15 minutes explaining in detail how much carbon Jennifer's pool used and how that was killing their community's future. Jennifer unplugged her home phone. Then the emails started, then the letters addressed to her house. Someone got her cell phone number, she never found out how, and texted her photos of her own property with words superimposed. "Stolen water, blood pool, monster." She called Officer Chen, who explained that most of it probably didn't qualify as harassment under the legal definition. "Probably," Jennifer said. "It's subjective," Officer Chen explained. "People expressing their opinions about your actions, that's protected speech." So Jennifer was unprotected. By the middle of August, there hadn't been another incident at the pool itself. The gate stayed locked. The signs remained. No one crossed the property line. But the campaign against her had evolved into something more sophisticated, Someone created a website, The Story of the Pool, One Woman's Lesson in Selfishness. It detailed every incident, but with a narrative overlay that painted Jennifer as a cold, calculating person who'd been looking for an excuse to humiliate the people around her. There was a comment section. 847 comments, most of them from strangers who'd never met her, explaining in detail why she was a bad person. Patricia came over on a Thursday afternoon and found Jennifer reading them. "Stop," Patricia said, pulling the laptop away. "Just stop. You're doing this to yourself." "Is it true?" Jennifer asked. "Am I a bad person?" Patricia, who'd been Jennifer's friend for 23 years, sat down heavily on the couch. "I don't know," she said finally. "I think you made a mistake, a big one, but I don't think it makes you a bad person." The entire internet thinks differently. The entire internet has never actually worked for you or known you, Patricia said. The entire internet is very good at making simple stories out of complicated situations. It's better at narrative than it is at truth. But Jennifer wasn't sure that was a meaningful distinction anymore. The narrative was the truth now. The narrative was what mattered. The narrative was what had cost her. Her job, her peace of mind, her sleep, her sense of safety in her own home, the respect of her community, and the narrative had given them satisfaction, a common enemy, a story about themselves as good people resisting a bad one. It was a terrible trade, and she'd made it willingly. The breaking point came on August 22nd. Jennifer woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of her front door being tested. Rattled. Someone was trying to open it from the outside, jiggling the handle with the kind of deliberate intent that suggested this wasn't random. She called 911. Officer Chen arrived 20 minutes later, and by then the person had vanished. There was no sign of forced entry, no damage, just a minor disturbance that might have been nothing at all. "Could have been anyone," Officer Chen said, in the tone of someone very tired of being called to this address. "Could have been someone just checking if it was locked." At 3 in the morning. "Probably not a break-in attempt," Officer Chen said. "More like intimidation, and yeah, that's technically illegal, but proving it." She trailed off meaningfully. After she left, Jennifer didn't go back to bed. She sat in her kitchen in the dark and thought about how quickly her life had become something unrecognizable. When dawn came, she made a decision. She called a real estate agent. The house sold in 3 weeks for $980,000, a loss of $220,000 on a property she'd owned for less than a year. The inspection had revealed minor water damage in the pool house, which the appraiser suggested might have come from the vandalism incidents. The buyer negotiated aggressively. Jennifer accepted the offer without counteroffering. She packed everything she could fit into a rental truck and drove east, toward the mountains, toward anywhere that wasn't here. As she pulled away from the house on Maple Ridge Drive one last time, she saw Derek's truck in his driveway, parked at an angle that suggested he'd come home just to be here when she left. He was sitting on his front porch steps, watching her go. He didn't wave. Jennifer didn't look back. But that night, as she checked into a small hotel in a town whose name she barely registered, she found herself thinking about the interview she'd give, someday, to someone who was thinking about doing what she'd done. "Don't," she would say, "don't design the perfect trap and invite them inside. Don't use the system against them, no matter how much they deserve it. Don't mistake legal for right, and don't assume that evidence matters more than narrative." Because it doesn't. 6 months later, Jennifer was sitting in a coffee shop in Burlington, Vermont, when she saw Derek's face on her phone. Not Derek himself, his face in a news article. The headline read, "Local contractor INDICTED on 11 counts of property fraud and embezzlement." Jennifer's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. The article was dense with details about a multi-year scheme in which Derek, along with a business partner, had been systematically overbilling clients, marking up materials, submitting false invoices, and pocketing the difference. The estimates suggested he'd stolen approximately $847,000 over 4 years. The investigation had started, it mentioned in a footnote, after a routine audit by the County Health Department's Property Division. During that audit, someone had mentioned Derek's name in connection with several incidents that year, and that had prompted a closer look at his business practices. That someone had been Rebecca Hartwell, who, it turned out, had also noticed something interesting during her original investigation of Jennifer's property. Derek had been the contractor who'd built the fence. The fence that had been vandalized repeatedly. The fence that Derek had clearly been breaking into. But also the fence that he'd installed incorrectly, cutting corners, using cheaper materials than specified in the contract, billing Jennifer for premium work. During the health department's follow-up investigation, they'd reviewed Jennifer's invoices against the county's standard building codes. Everything was slightly off, slightly under spec, slightly overcharged. They'd also reviewed Derek's other jobs in the county over the past 3 years. The pattern was consistent. Jennifer read the article 3 times. Then she called Patricia. "Did you know about this?" she asked, not bothering with hello. "That Derek was stealing from you?" Patricia said. "Yeah, I got an email from the county about a week ago. I think everyone who did work with him got one. He's been running this scam on probably 50 different homeowners." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I thought," Patricia paused. "I thought maybe knowing wouldn't help. I thought you might be trying to move on." "I lost my house because of Derek," Jennifer said quietly. "Financially, yes, but also because he and his friends made it clear that I didn't belong there anymore, and all this time he was the criminal." "According to the court documents? Yeah, pretty significantly." Jennifer hung up and ordered another coffee. The case was settled by late spring. Derek accepted a plea deal, 2 years in county jail, 5 years probation, and restitution orders that would keep him paying victims for the next decade. His contractor's license was revoked permanently. His business was dissolved. His house, which was apparently owned entirely through equity from his years of theft, was seized by the government to pay restitution. The news articles framed it as a success story for law enforcement. There was no mention of Jennifer, no apology, no acknowledgement that she'd been one of his victims, only in a column labeled construction fraud rather than under pool trespassing. But Jennifer found herself following the case obsessively anyway. She read every article. She looked up the final sentencing. She even drove back to the town once in late April just to see the house where Derek had lived. It was being prepared for sale by the government. A foreclosure, essentially, the ironic inverse of what had happened to her own property. She didn't feel satisfied. If anything, she felt worse. Because she realized, somewhere during her reading of the 47th article about Derek's crimes, that none of this made what she'd done okay. Justice and truth were apparently 2 different things. Derek was a bad person who'd committed actual crimes, but that didn't make Jennifer's calculated humiliation of a group of people into something noble or even fully justified. She'd been right about the trespassing, but she'd been wrong about the trap. That realization was sitting heavy in her chest when her phone rang, 6 weeks later. It was a lawyer, not her lawyer, but the lawyer for Martin Hartley. "Ms. Morrison," he said, "I'm calling on behalf of Martin Hartley regarding your position at Hartley and Associates. Mr. Hartley would like to discuss your returning to the company." Jennifer was at a farmer's market in Montpelier. She nearly dropped her phone. "I'm sorry, what?" "Mr. Hartley would like to reopen negotiations regarding your employment," the lawyer repeated. "He believes he may have handled the situation incorrectly last year. Would you be available for a call?" Jennifer agreed to a call. Then she spent the next 12 hours vacillating between anger and hope. When Martin's voice came through her phone the next morning, he sounded genuinely nervous. "Jen," he said, "I owe you an apology." "You do," she agreed. "I got caught up in narrative," he continued. "The story, and I chose the story over a 19-year employee with a proven track record. I chose to believe the internet over you, and I was wrong." "You were," she said. She didn't make it easy for him. "I'd like to offer you your position back," he said. "Full salary retroactive to when you left, plus a settlement that would cover." "The house," she said quietly. "Yes," he said. "I did some research. The loss you took on that sale, the taxes, the fees, I'd like to cover all of it, plus another 100,000 to acknowledge the professional damage. And I'd like to ask you to come back." Jennifer sat with this for a long moment. "Why?" she asked. "Because I realized something," Martin said. "Everything that happened to you, the invasion of your property, the vandalism, the campaign against you, the pressure to fire you, it was all about power. Who gets to decide what's right? And I helped them win. I chose the winning narrative instead of the true one, and that's the kind of person I don't want to be anymore. Jennifer believed him. She also believed that Martin had gotten legal advice, suggesting that settling with her, bringing her back, and controlling her narrative would protect the company better than continuing to distance themselves from her. Both things were true. She went back to work in late July of that year. By then, Derek was 6 months into his sentence. The town on Maple Ridge Drive had moved on to other controversies. The website documenting her failures had been taken down, though a cached version still existed somewhere on the internet, waiting for anyone who wanted to find it. Her old office had been preserved exactly as she'd left it. The same photos, the same furniture. Someone had even placed a welcome back gift on her desk, a beautiful, expensive water bottle with the Hartley and Associates logo. The irony was so complete it was almost funny. Almost. She returned to her work with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she was trying to outrun something. The first 6 months she was back, she worked 70-hour weeks. She led 3 massive acquisitions. She built a new department focused on long-term client retention. She was, by every metric, exactly the kind of executive that Hartley and Associates wanted. But something had shifted in her. She'd learned that being right didn't protect you. Being legal didn't matter if the narrative was against you. And winning could look exactly like losing if you were willing to wait long enough. In October, Patricia suggested that Jennifer get therapy. "You need to process what happened," Patricia said, over lunch at a restaurant near Jennifer's office. "I processed it," Jennifer said. "I filed it away, I moved on." "You're still living in it," Patricia said gently. "Every article about Derek, you read it. Every time someone mentions the pool, you flinch. You're still fighting the battle, just mentally instead of publicly." So Jennifer found a therapist, a smart woman named Dr. Reeves who specialized in complex trauma and organizational dynamics. In their first session, Jennifer explained the entire story. The pool, the invasion, the trap, the consequence, the loss, the vindication. Dr. Reeves listened without interrupting. When Jennifer finished, she asked a single question. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" "From Derek, from the town, from yourself. What would make this feel resolved?" Jennifer opened her mouth to answer, then closed it, then opened it again. "I don't know," she said finally. "That's the beginning," Dr. Reeves said. "Figure that out, because right now you're trapped in a loop where Derek gets punished and you still lose, and that's not actually justice. That's just 2 people suffering with the only difference being that the court sanctioned yours." By December, Jennifer had something that looked like an answer. She was back in the town on Maple Ridge Drive for the first time in months. Not to the house on the hill. That belonged to someone else now, someone who presumably wasn't interested in community pools, but to the courthouse, where Derek was appearing for a hearing regarding the distribution of his remaining assets. She sat in the gallery and she watched him. He was thinner, visibly aged. The easy confidence was gone. What remained was a hollow kind of person, someone whose sense of self had been built entirely on being liked and had crumbled the moment that popularity was withdrawn. During a break, she approached him in the hallway. He saw her and immediately tensed. "Jennifer, I wanted you to know," she said quietly, "that I know about the construction fraud, about the other victims, about the fact that I wasn't the first person you stole from." Derek's face crumpled slightly. "I'm aware of my crimes. I want to withdraw the property damage claims," she said. "I want to reduce my testimony in the civil suits to only the documented facts with no color commentary. And I want you to know that when you get out, I'm not going to be watching. I'm not going to be following your case. I'm not going to be hopping for your failure." Derek stared at her. "That's not forgiveness," she continued. "That's not absolution. That's just me deciding that I don't want to be someone who rearranges their life around hating someone else." "Why are you telling me this?" Derek asked. "Because I spent a year arranging my life around you," Jennifer said. "And I'm done. I hope you rehabilitate. I hope you don't do this to anyone else. But more than that, I hope you don't spend the next decade thinking about me the way I've spent this one thinking about you, because that would be a tragedy." She left before he could respond. 2 years after buying the house on Maple Ridge Drive, Jennifer purchased a property on a quiet cul-de-sac outside of Amherst, Massachusetts. This house had no pool. It had a lovely garden, a small guest house, a barn that she thought she might eventually convert into a studio, and most importantly, a 3-acre buffer between her property and anyone else's. It was set back from the road. Trees obscured the view from the neighbors' houses. The driveway curved through the property like a ribbon, ensuring that nobody could see it from the street. She decorated it slowly, carefully, choosing each piece as if she were building something that might eventually become a life again. Patricia visited in the spring and walked through the empty rooms with Jennifer, commenting on the light, the space, the peaceful isolation. "Are you going to put in a pool?" Patricia asked gently. "No," Jennifer said. "I'm done with pools. I'm done with things that require defending." Instead, she built a small pond, really just a very large water feature, but a genuine ecosystem that would eventually support fish and frogs and the kind of life that happened when you let nature do what it wanted. "That's very zen," Patricia observed. "That's very I learned a hard lesson," Jennifer corrected. She returned to work with a new understanding of her role. The VP of Operations position had changed during her absence. The company had grown. There were new divisions, new pressure, new expectations. Jennifer moved through all of it with a kind of deliberate competence that suggested she was good at her job but not personally invested in being great at it. Martin noticed. "You're different," he said during her quarterly review. "You're excellent, but you're distant." "I have better boundaries now," Jennifer said. "That's healthy," Martin agreed. "But I want to make sure you're not using this job as a refuge. You can't live your whole life at work." "I know," Jennifer said, and she did. She'd learned that the hard way. That summer, she took a month off. She drove through Vermont, hiked in the mountains, read books on her porch in the sunshine. She learned that she could exist without accomplishing anything, without building or acquiring or defeating, and that was okay. She also discovered that she still had nightmares about her old house. In the dreams, she was trying to drain the pool, but the water kept returning, filling it faster than she could empty it. In other dreams, she'd never seen Derek at the courthouse. In those dreams, he was still in the town, still leading teenagers into her backyard, still winning. Dr. Reeves told her this was normal. That trauma didn't have a tidy end point. That healing was iterative and nonlinear, and sometimes involved revisiting the same fear over and over until it finally got tired of haunting you. Derek was released from county jail on a Tuesday in October, exactly 2 years after his sentencing. Jennifer didn't know about it until she got a call from Officer Chen, who tracked her down specifically to give her the news. "I thought you'd want to know," Officer Chen said, "that he's being released today." "Thank you for telling me," Jennifer said, meaning it. She spent that evening in her garden, sitting by her pond, and she thought about Derek stepping out of the jail into the world that had moved on without him. He would go back to a town that knew him as a criminal. He would have to find work that didn't require a contractor's license. He would have to rebuild his life from absolutely nothing. She felt a small, mean spark of satisfaction at that thought. She also felt a larger, more genuine sadness. Because she realized, finally, that she'd won and lost at exactly the same moment. That her triumph had been hollow. That Derek's punishment hadn't made her life better, it had just made him's worse, which was a different thing entirely. The letter arrived in December. It was forwarded twice, from her old address to her parents' house to the address she'd eventually left for her lawyer. The envelope was expensive. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, the writing of someone who'd spent a lot of time thinking about whether to send this and how to say it. "Jennifer, I hope this finds you well. I wanted to reach out in person, but I respect your boundaries, so I'm writing instead. I'm not going to apologize for what I did. Apologizing would make this about forgiveness, and I don't think I deserve that. What I did was steal from you and trespass on your property. What I did after that was fail to listen when you asked me to stop. But I want you to know what happened in prison. I had a lot of time to think. I had access to a prison education program, and I learned about construction fraud and about how I'd been ripping people off for years. I made a list of victims, 37 people. I'm in the process of paying restitution to all of them, which will take the rest of my life. It's not enough. It's not anywhere close to enough. But I'm doing it because it's the right thing, not because I expect forgiveness. When I got out, I moved to Burlington. I'm working for a contractor who knows my history and who's willing to give me a chance. I'm going to night school to study engineering. I'm trying to build something real, something that isn't based on ripping people off. The reason I'm writing is that I learned something in prison about you. They had internet access in the library, and I looked up your name. I found articles about Derek's scheme, about how I'd cheated 37 people, and I found articles about you. I read about the trap you set, the health department visit, the humiliation, and I want to tell you that I understand why you did it. I was an asshole, I deserved it, I probably deserved worse. But I also want to tell you that I hope you're okay. I hope you're not spending your life hating me, because that would mean I did more damage than I probably deserved to have done. The trap you set caught me, sure, but I'm wondering if it also caught you. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I'm asking you to consider that we both learned hard lessons, and we're both trying to be different people now. I hope you've built something beautiful where that pool used to be. Derek. Jennifer read the letter 3 times. Then she called Dr. Reeves and made an emergency appointment. He's trying to reframe the narrative, Jennifer said, packing in Dr. Reeves's office. He's trying to make himself the reformed criminal and make me, what, the woman who can't let go, the one who's still holding a grudge. Is that what he's doing? Dr. Reeves asked. Or is he actually acknowledging what happened and trying to move forward? How can I tell the difference? You probably can't, Dr. Reeves said. You can only decide whether forgiving him would help you heal or whether continuing to be angry does. Jennifer went home and she sat with the letter for 3 days. She read it until she could recite it from memory. She looked up Derek's Instagram and found him, older and thinner, posing in front of job sites with a genuine smile. She searched his employer's website and confirmed that, yes, he was working for a small construction company, restoring historic homes in Burlington. On the 4th day, she typed out a response. Derek, I don't know if you deserve forgiveness. I suspect that's not really for me to decide. What I know is that I spent a year of my life hating you, and it didn't make me happy. It didn't even make me safe. It just made me someone I didn't recognize. So I'm choosing not to hate you anymore. That's not forgiveness, that's just letting go. I'm glad you're trying to be different. I hope it sticks. I hope you don't hurt anyone else. And I hope that someday, when you think about what happened, you don't think about how I trapped you. You think about how you broke in. I've built something in place of the pool. Not something beautiful necessarily, just something quiet, something mine, something that doesn't require defending. I wish you well. Jennifer. She mailed it before she could change her mind. Winter came to Massachusetts, and Jennifer found herself unexpectedly content. She worked, but not obsessively. She tended her garden, though everything was dormant now. She read voraciously. She started cooking again, something she hadn't done since she was young, and believed that nourishment should be simple and functional rather than something to be enjoyed. She made a friend, a woman named Sadie who lived 2 miles down the road and who'd been recommended to her by Patricia as someone she should meet. Sadie was a therapist who'd left her practice to raise goats. They met at a farmer's market and immediately discovered that they had a shared sense of humor about how complicated it was to be a woman trying to exist in the world without apologizing for it. Pool woman? Sadie asked, when Jennifer finally told her the story over wine on Sadie's porch in January. Allegedly, Jennifer said. Would you do it differently if you could? Sadie asked. Jennifer thought about that, about the moment when she decided to invite Derek and his friends to the party. About the moment when she realized she could use the system against him. About all the moments when she could have chosen differently. Yes, she said finally, I'd probably move to a different house, sell before it became a war. It wasn't worth it. Was he worth it? Sadie asked. Derek, was humiliating him worth the cost to you? No, Jennifer said, but I understand why I did it. That's growth, Sadie said and poured her more wine. Spring came and with it a small surprise. Jennifer received a package at her house. No return address, but the postmark was from Burlington. Inside was a beautiful book, a leather-bound volume about the history of water features in domestic architecture, with particular focus on pools and ponds as symbols of human civilization. There was a note inside, in Derek's careful handwriting. I saw this and thought of you. Your job is restoration, so I thought you might appreciate it. No response necessary. D. Jennifer held the book in her hands and realized that she was crying. Not from anger or hurt or even satisfaction, but from the strange, complicated grief of understanding that two people could cause each other real damage and still, eventually, move on. That forgiveness wasn't about absolving someone or even truly forgiving them. It was about deciding that you were tired of carrying the weight of their offense. That evening she found a photo online of her old house. It had been renovated by its new owners. They'd filled in the pool and replaced it with a substantial garden. The limestone surround was gone. The waterfall feature had been dismantled. It was now, according to the real estate listing, a charming home with carefully curated outdoor space, perfect for the family that wants quiet and privacy. Jennifer looked at the before and after photos, and she realized that she'd been grieving the wrong thing. She'd been grieving the loss of the pool, the loss of her investment, the loss of her property. But what she'd actually built there, what she'd actually wanted to build was space, ownership, the right to say no. And that was still hers, whether it lived in a pool or a garden, or simply in her own conviction that her boundaries were worth respecting. 5 years after the incident, Jennifer received an email from a literary agent. The email was brief. "I came across a reference to the pool incident in Maple Ridge. I think your story would make a powerful memoir. Would you be willing to discuss this?" Jennifer deleted the email without responding. A month later, the same agent called her through her office, then through her home phone, which she'd had to start using again, then through Patricia, asking Patricia to pass along her number. Jennifer finally agreed to a phone call just to make it stop. "Your story resonates," the agent, whose name was Marcus, explained. "It's about power, property, community, boundaries. It's about what happens when good people make bad choices. It would be a fascinating read." "It's also my life," Jennifer said. "It's not a narrative to be packaged and sold." "It's all of those things," Marcus agreed. "But it's also a story that the world should hear, not to shame you, but to understand the complexity of the situation. You were right and wrong. Your community was right and wrong. Derek was a victim and a criminal. There are no easy answers here." Jennifer hung up and called Dr. Reeves. "People want to tell my story," she said, feeling oddly violated. "They want to turn it into a book, make it public." "Do you want them to?" Dr. Reeves asked. "No, it's private, it's mine." "Then tell them no," Dr. Reeves said. Jennifer did. She told the agent no very firmly and requested that he stop contacting her. He did, but not before sending her a single email. "Your reluctance to share your story is understandable, but stories like yours matter. They're how we learn." That fall, Derek contacted her through Instagram. He'd found her account, private, with only 100 followers, mostly old colleagues and Patricia and Sadie, and sent her a direct message asking if they could talk. Jennifer considered ignoring it. Instead, she agreed to a video call. He looked good, genuinely good. His hair was longer now, lightly gray. He had the tan of someone who worked outdoors. There was something settled about his face that suggested he'd made peace with whatever he'd been running from before. "Thank you for calling," he said. "I wasn't sure you would." "What's this about?" Jennifer asked. "I'm getting married," Derek said, "and I want to invite you to the wedding." Jennifer laughed before she could stop herself. "That's insane." "Hear me out," Derek said. "Amanda, my fiancée, she knows everything. About the fraud, about what I did to you, about the trap. And she thinks that if you came to the wedding, it would mean something. That we could all acknowledge that people can change. That damage can be repaired even if it's not exactly fixed." "Derek, no," Jennifer said. "Why not?" he asked. "Because coming to your wedding would be pretending that this all worked out, that the system functioned, that everything's fine now." "Isn't it?" Derek asked. "I went to prison, I made restitution, I've genuinely tried to be a different person. You moved on, built a new life, by any reasonable metric." "I lost my job," Jennifer interrupted. "I lost my house. I lost my sense of safety in my own community. You lost nothing that I didn't take from you." "You're right," Derek said quietly. "Which is why I'm asking you to come. Not because we've made peace, but because I want to acknowledge what happened. In front of Amanda, in front of the people I care about. I want them to know who I was and what I did." "That's not my responsibility," Jennifer said. "It's not," Derek agreed. "I'm asking anyway." Jennifer hung up and sat with that conversation for 3 days. She called Patricia. "Derek invited me to his wedding." "Are you going?" Patricia asked. "Should I?" I don't know, Patricia said. Will it help you? That was the real question, wasn't it? Would it help? Or would it just be a complicated emotional experience that she'd spend years processing? She called Sadie. I've been invited to Derek's wedding. The Derek? Sadie asked. The same one. Are you going? I don't know. Do you want to? Jennifer realized that she did want to, which was deeply surprising. She wanted to see him get married. She wanted to meet Amanda. She wanted to witness him building something real and being part of a community that knew who he was and chose to stand beside him anyway. She wanted to see what redemption actually looked like, rather than just reading about it in letters and Instagram posts. The wedding was in Burlington, at a small farm venue that specialized in hosting ceremonies. It was a Saturday in June, and the weather was perfect. Clear skies, warm breeze, the kind of day that made you believe in good things. Jennifer almost didn't go. She arrived at the venue and sat in her car for 20 minutes, seriously considering just leaving. This was a bad idea. This was stepping back into a story she'd already decided was finished. But then she got out of the car anyway. Derek saw her from across the lawn and immediately came to greet her. Amanda was with him, a small, fierce-looking woman with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She thanked Jennifer for coming, not awkwardly, which suggested that Derek had prepared her thoroughly for this moment. I want you to know, Amanda said, that Derek talks about you a lot, not in a way that's dwelling, but in a way that's honest. He says you taught him about consequences, that you showed him what real strength looks like. I trapped him, Jennifer said. He deserved to be trapped, Amanda said. Not because you're a bad person who enjoys revenge, but because he'd violated your boundaries and your property and your trust, and you needed him to understand that there were real costs to that, which, apparently, he does now. Jennifer wasn't sure how to respond to that kind of grace, so she simply accepted a drink and found a seat near the back of the ceremony. The wedding was beautiful in an understated way. Derek and Amanda had written their own vows, and they were funny and honest and occasionally heartbreaking. Derek talked about having been lost and having been found. Amanda talked about choosing to see the person Derek was becoming rather than dwelling on who he'd been. And Jennifer, sitting in the back row, found herself crying again. But not from grief this time. From something more complicated. From witnessing two people choose each other despite, or maybe because of, their respective damage. From seeing Derek stand in front of his friends and family and acknowledge his past without excusing it. From watching Amanda meet him in that accountability and decide it was enough. After the reception, Derek found Jennifer leaving early. Thank you for coming, he said. You're welcome, Jennifer replied. I want to tell you something, Derek continued, and then I won't bring it up again. I've thought about that day when you trapped me, probably 10,000 times, and I've hated you for it, and I've forgiven you for it, and I've tried to make sense of it. Jennifer waited. I think you did the right thing in the end, Derek said. Not the way you did it, but the outcome. I needed to face consequences, real ones. And if you'd just called the police, if you'd been reasonable and measured, I might have gotten away with more. Might have continued ripping people off. Might have never really seen myself. I didn't do it to help you, Jennifer said. I know, Derek said. You did it because you were angry and violated and you wanted me to understand what that felt like. And I do. I really do. He put out his hand and Jennifer shook it. Go live your life, she said, the real one. I am, Derek replied. I hope you are too. On the drive back to Massachusetts, Jennifer thought about what Derek had said. She thought about the narrative she'd built. The pool woman, wronged and wronging, trapped in a cycle of revenge and vindication. She thought about how that story had felt like the truth, and how the truth had turned out to be much more complicated. She thought about the version of herself she'd been 5 years ago, and the version she was now. They were different people, separated by loss and learning, and the slow, reluctant acceptance that winning and losing were not always opposites. That sometimes they were the same thing, just experienced differently depending on your perspective and your willingness to grow. When she got home, she found a wedding invitation on her doorstep, the printed kind with calligraphy, not digital. It was addressed to Jennifer Morrison and guest. Inside, in Amanda's handwriting, was a note. We wanted you to have something tangible, something real, a reminder that you were there, that this happened, not to haunt you but to ground you. You're part of our story now, whether you wanted to be or not. With gratitude, Derek and Amanda. Jennifer put the invitation on her mantel, right between a photo of her garden and a book that Derek had sent her years before. And for the first time since she'd left Maple Ridge Drive, she felt like the story was actually, genuinely finished. 8 years after the pool incident, Jennifer Morrison returned to Maple Ridge Drive. Not by accident, but by design. She'd spent 3 months in planning, researching the property, coordinating with the owners, arranging logistics. She'd told Patricia and Sadie and even Derek what she was going to do, and they'd all tried in their own ways to talk her out of it. "It's morbid," Patricia had said. "It's necessary," Jennifer replied. The couple who owned the house now, Mark and Susan Chen, had been remarkably accommodating when she'd reached out. They'd asked a few questions. Were they in danger? Was she going to steal something? And then, seemingly satisfied with her answers, had invited her to come visit on a Saturday afternoon. Jennifer pulled into the driveway at 2 p.m. The house looked exactly the same and completely different. The new owners had painted it a softer shade of gray. They'd removed some of the more aggressive landscaping and replaced it with cottage-style gardens. The pool had been gone for 6 years, filled in with slate, and transformed into a meditation garden with a small fountain in the center. The irony of water returned in a different form, not lost on her. Mark and Susan welcomed her warmly, seemingly unbothered by the strangeness of the situation. They'd clearly read about the incident online and were impressed by Jennifer's willingness to return. "It must be strange," Susan said, offering her coffee as they sat on the new deck. "It is," Jennifer agreed. "Smaller than I remember. Time does that." "We've loved this house," Mark said. "It's been peaceful, a real sanctuary." Jennifer nodded, understanding that he was trying to tell her something, that his family had what she'd wanted, that her loss had eventually been someone's gain. "I'm glad," she said, and meant it. They left her alone for an hour, walked to the mailbox, got groceries, gave her space, and Jennifer descended the stone steps to the meditation garden. The fountain was beautiful. Water fell from a stone structure into a shallow basin, and small plants grew around it, hostas, moss, delicate ground covers that seemed content to exist in the shade. There were stone pathways that allowed you to walk close to the water without disturbing it. She sat on a bench nearby and just existed. She thought about the day she'd finished the pool, about how she'd felt floating in that water, believing she'd finally bought the thing that would make her whole. She thought about the invasion, about her rage and sense of violation, about the trap she'd set. She thought about Derek and about the person he'd been and about the person he'd become. She thought about herself, all the selves she'd been, the ambitious woman who'd believed hard work was enough, the violated woman who believed punishment was justice, the woman who'd learned, slowly and painfully, that neither of those things was quite true. A child's voice called from inside the house, "Daddy, where's the juice?" And Jennifer smiled. There was a life happening in her old house, a real one, a messy, normal, complicated life where people drank juice and fixed things and loved each other despite being flawed. It was exactly the kind of life the pool had been supposed to enable, and she'd been too afraid, too angry, too convinced of her own righteousness, to actually let anyone else have it. As Jennifer drove away from Maple Ridge Drive one final time, she made a decision. She called Derek. "Hey," she said when he answered, "I just visited the house, the old house, and I realized something." "What's that?" Derek asked. "That I spent so much time hating you for invading my space that I never gave you the chance to be human," Jennifer said. "And then when you tried to become human, I didn't know how to accept that." "Jennifer," Derek started. "Let me finish," she said. "I'm writing a book about this, about the whole thing. The pool, the invasion, the trap, the aftermath, all of it, and I wanted your permission. I wanted to tell the story the right way, not as a morality tale where I'm right and you're wrong, but as it actually happened. Messy and complicated, and both of us learning the hard way." There was a long silence. "Yes," Derek said finally. Tell it true. Don't make me the villain and don't make yourself the victim. Make us both what we actually were, people who made mistakes and tried to learn from them." "That's the plan," Jennifer said. The book took 3 years to write. Jennifer worked on it in the evenings and weekends, interspersed with her regular job at Hartley and Associates. She interviewed Derek extensively. She tracked down the other victims of his fraud and included their stories. She spoke with Officer Chen, with Dr. Reeves, with Martin Hartley about what had driven his decisions. She wrote about the threads of class and neighborhood conflict that had made the situation possible. She wrote about the internet's role in shaping narrative. She wrote about the cost of winning. The book was titled The Pool, and it was published by a small press that specialized in thoughtful nonfiction about contemporary American life. It didn't become a bestseller, but it found its audience, people interested in property disputes, in neighborhood conflict, in the ethics of vigilante justice, in the messy reality of how people actually change. The reviews were mixed. Some critics praised her honesty and willingness to implicate herself. Some accused her of making excuses for Derek. Some suggested she hadn't gone far enough in exploring her own complicity in the destruction of her former community. She read them all, and she didn't disagree with any of them. 5 years after the book's publication, Jennifer received a call from the town council of Maple Ridge. They were planning a community dialogue about conflict resolution and neighborhood relations, and they wanted her to participate. "We've read your book," the councilwoman, Patricia Harrison, explained, "and we think it would be valuable for the community to hear from you directly about what happened and how you've processed it." Jennifer almost said no. But she thought about that girl she used to be, convinced that boundaries and legal rights were enough. She thought about Derek, who'd built a life on attempting to make amends. She thought about the community that had chosen narrative over truth. "I'll do it," she said. The event was held on a Thursday evening in October, in the community center of Maple Ridge. The same town that had rejected her, expelled her, forced her to sell her house at a loss. About 200 people showed up. Some of them were people she recognized from the original incident. She saw former neighbors, teenagers who'd been in her pool, parents who judged her. Derek was there too, sitting in the back, his presence a kind of quiet support. There was a moderator, a professional one, trained in conflict resolution, who guided the conversation. Jennifer spoke first, describing the original incident without editorializing. She explained how violated she'd felt, how she'd responded not with proportional justice, but with calculated humiliation. "I think I was trying to teach a lesson," she said. "But the lesson I actually taught was that if you push someone far enough, they'll find a way to push back, and everyone loses." Then Derek spoke. He talked about his perspective, the casual entitlement, the refusal to hear no, the eventual consequences. He talked about prison and about what he'd learned there. He talked about the family he'd built, the life he'd created, the ways that Jennifer's trap had actually saved him from continuing to hurt people. "I'm grateful for her anger," he said, which is a weird thing to say, but it's true. Then the community got to speak. Some people were defensive, reliving old arguments. Some people were sympathetic, acknowledging how complicated the situation had been. One woman, a mother whose teenage son had been at the pool parties, talked about how the incident had shaped her parenting, how she'd become more willing to listen when her kids said no, because she'd seen firsthand what happened when people didn't. By the end of the evening, nothing was resolved. No consensus was reached. But something had shifted, a collective acknowledgement that the situation was too complex for easy answers, that narrative and truth were not the same thing, that people were capable of change and growth. As Jennifer was leaving the community center, the woman from the mother group approached her. "I wanted to thank you," the woman said. "My son was one of the kids who used your pool, and he's doing good work now with water conservation nonprofits. He says he thinks a lot about that summer, about boundaries and respect and what it means to actually listen. I think some of that came from the incident." Jennifer looked at her, this stranger who'd raised a teenager who'd invaded her privacy, and then apparently learned something valuable from the consequence. "I'm glad," she said, and she meant it. The final scene, the one that Jennifer would revisit many times in the years to come, happened as she was walking to her car. She found Derek waiting by it. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she replied. "I wanted to tell you something," he said. "Amanda's pregnant, we're having a daughter, and we want to name her Jennifer." Jennifer felt her breath catch. "Not after you specifically," Derek rushed to add, seeing her expression. "Just, Jennifer is a strong name, a name for someone who knows what she stands for, someone who's willing to fight for what matters even when it's hard." "Even when it means hurting people?" Jennifer asked. Even when it means making complicated choices that hurt people and hurt you, Derek corrected. Yes, that kind of strength. Jennifer thought about the daughter that Derek and Amanda would raise. She thought about a girl growing up knowing the complicated history of her name, inheriting a story about boundaries and violations and redemption. Take care of her, Jennifer said. I will, Derek promised. Driving back to Massachusetts that night, Jennifer thought about narrative and truth, about the stories we tell ourselves and the stories the world tells about us. The pool incident had been many things to many people. To Derek, a wake-up call, a consequence, a catalyst for change. To the community, a spectacle, a moral lesson, a vindication of their values. To the police, a minor jurisdictional problem that wasn't really their responsibility. To Jennifer, a loss, a victory, a humiliation, a triumph, depending on how you measured it. But mostly, looking back from the perspective of 15 years, it had been a story about two people who didn't know how to talk to each other, who had to learn through pain and loss and consequences what it meant to actually see another person. That wasn't a satisfying narrative ending. But it was the true one. And Jennifer had learned, finally, that true was better than satisfying. She pulled into her driveway at midnight, turned off the engine, and sat in the darkness of her car for a long moment. Tomorrow she would go back to work. She would answer emails and attend meetings and live the quiet, competent life she'd built. The pond would still be there, and Sadie would come over on Friday, and Patricia would call to see how the event went. The world would continue. Derek would have his daughter. The house on Maple Ridge Drive would see more families, more lives, more stories. And Jennifer would be here in the present, no longer trapped in the past. She got out of the car and looked up at the stars. Somewhere in Burlington, Derek was probably still awake, telling Amanda about the evening. Somewhere in the community center parking lot, other people were processing the conversation, forming new opinions, writing stories in their heads about what it all meant. But here, in her own driveway, Jennifer simply existed. The pool was gone, the anger was gone, the need to be right was finally, definitively gone. What remained was this: a woman who'd learned to set boundaries and who'd learned more painfully to respect them in others. A woman who'd built something beautiful and lost it, and then built something else, quieter and truer. A woman who'd been wronged and had wronged in return, and who'd finally, after 15 years, understood the difference between justice and peace. She went inside her house, made a cup of tea, and settled in at her desk. There was more to write. There would always be more to write, because the story of people learning to see each other was never really finished. 20 years after the pool incident, Jennifer Morrison received an invitation. It was beautifully printed, calligraphied formal. You are invited to celebrate the high school graduation of Jennifer Rose Chen, daughter of Derek and Amanda Chen, and goddaughter to all those who believed in second chances. Jennifer RSVP'd immediately. At the graduation ceremony, she sat in the back row, as she always did at these family moments that weren't quite hers but felt important to witness. Little Jennifer, who was tall now, serious, kind, with her father's determination and her mother's fierce gentleness, gave a valedictorian speech about boundaries and community and the complicated work of learning to see each other. In her speech, she referenced a book, The Pool by Jennifer Morrison. My parents named me after this woman, Jennifer Rose said, because they wanted me to understand something important, that being strong doesn't mean being rigid, that setting boundaries doesn't mean rejecting community, that the most powerful thing we can do is learn to see people not as enemies or allies, but as other humans, equally complicated, equally deserving of grace. Jennifer Morrison sat in the back row and cried. Not from the grief of what she'd lost, but from the quiet wonder of what loss could eventually become. A place where people learned, where boundaries became wisdom, where revenge transformed into redemption and two people who'd hurt each other found a way, not to make peace, but to make meaning. After the ceremony, young Jennifer found her in the parking lot. Thank you for coming, the girl said. She was confident, composed, but there was something tentative in her voice. The uncertainty of someone meeting a legend and discovering that legends were just people. Thank you for your speech, Jennifer said, and for being named after me even though that's a lot of weight to carry. My parents explained it, Jennifer Rose said. They said you taught them something about the cost of being right, that lesson. It shaped how they raised me, made them gentler, I think, more willing to listen. Jennifer smiled. Then I'm proud to have influenced them so negatively. Jennifer Rose laughed, and the sound carried something that felt like forgiveness. Not forgiveness for what Jennifer had done, that had been worked out long ago, but forgiveness for being human, complicated, capable of both harm and healing. Good luck, Jennifer said, whatever comes next. Good luck to you too, Jennifer Rose replied. I read your book. Some of it made me angry at you. Some of it made me angry at my dad. Some of it made me understand that being angry was the whole point, that seeing clearly is more important than feeling comfortable. She paused, then added, I want to be a conflict mediator. I want to help people learn to see each other. I think that's maybe what you were trying to do with my dad, even if the method was messed up. Jennifer looked at this girl, this person who existed because of consequences and choices and the willingness of two people to try to be better. And she understood, finally, that the story of the pool had never been about her and Derek at all. It had been about the world learning how to deal with the complex reality of people trying to coexist. Every incident since, every neighborhood dispute, every viral conflict, every time the internet decided someone was guilty, they were all repetitions of that original pattern. People refusing to see, people demanding justice, people using systems to hurt each other. And sometimes, if they were very lucky, people learning a better way. That night back in her quiet house in Massachusetts, Jennifer sat at her desk and opened a blank document. She had another book to write. Not about the pool anymore, but about all the pools, all the things we build to keep ourselves separate, and all the ways we eventually learn that separation isn't safety. That the only real safety comes from learning to see each other. She typed the first sentence, and then the second and the third. Building something that might, someday, help someone else avoid her mistakes. Building something beautiful out of failure. That, she understood at last, was the real meaning of redemption.